Clap Talk. We are glad that you were able to find time to be with us. We know how hard that can be. To us, your being here today totally underscores the importance of this conversation and your interest in today's topic, how educators can help students with intellectual disabilities to think college. Today, we have the opportunity to hear from experts across the country about supporting successful transitions for students with intellectual disability, from secondary education to higher education. We thank our panelists, Brenda Barrio, Carla Johnson, Derek Wesley, and Mary Diegert, and of course, a big thank you to Dan Habib of the Westchester Institute for Human Development, who will be facilitating the panel and our conversation. But before we start, let me introduce myself. I am Ruchika Chopra, and I work with the Urban Collaborative. I am here along with my colleagues, Executive Director of the Urban Collaborative, Lauren Katzman, and Project Manager, Catherine Benedict. We will be supporting this conversation today, and we'll keep an eye out for questions that you may have for our panel and answer any Urban Collaborative related questions. Let me remind you, as you all may have noted when you came in, we will be recording the session and we'll have it available for you and your colleagues to review after today. During the discussion, we ask if you can please post your questions in the chat. We want this to be interactive and we'll do our best to answer the questions that you have during the presentation. But to be sure that we get to all the questions, Dan and the panel have also been kind enough to share some more of their time, and we'll stay on after this hour if any of you want to stay and connect with them. With that, let us get the show on the road and welcome Dan Habib. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Ruchika. Hello, everybody. So great to be here today. Want to thank the Urban Collaborative and Think College and all of you for joining us today. We have a great discussion ahead. My name is Dan Habib. My pronouns are he, him. I'm here in New Hampshire, where I live. And a quick visual description, I'm a 58-year-old white male, balding. I've got a plant behind me and a painting of sunflowers over my shoulder from the wonderful artist Nair Shahid from my film Intelligent Lives. And just very happy to be here today. Before we jump into what I know will be an extremely informative and engaging discussion with the panel, I just want to give you a little background about inclusive post-secondary education nationally and this campaign that we started about a year ago called Think Higher, Think College. And I do want to, again, reinforce, if you have questions at any point, throw them in the chat or anything you want information about, and we're going to be getting to go to those throughout the whole session. So just a few slides to kind of get us going here and give you a sense of what we have to share today and some information. Think College, what is Think College? Think College is a national technical assistance training, research, and evaluation center dedicated to developing, expanding, and improving higher education options for students with intellectual disability. The Think College National Coordinating Center is one piece of it, the Inclusive Higher Education Network, Future Quest Island, and Transition Leadership Certificate within UMass Boston. There's a lot of information here. If you go to the thinkcollege.org website, all of this is spelled out in great detail, much more than I'll have time to talk about today. But I do want to reinforce that there are hundreds of programs around the country, inclusive post-secondary education programs, where students with intellectual disability can go to college. We can put in the chat a link to the actual interactive map on the website. My colleague Becky Lazo is going to be throwing some things in the chat today for you. And there's a great map on the website that'll give you a sense of all the different ways that you can research the different programs around the country. So just some statistical background that I think will create some important context. There are more than 420,000 school-age students with intellectual disability in the United States, but fewer than 2% of them are likely to attend college after high school. So that's a pretty small sliver of the pie. And for those 98% of adults with intellectual disability who don't go to college, the current reality is not what I'm sure anybody on this meeting would want to see. Only 15% of them are likely to have paid employment in the community. 42% of them attend a day program or a sheltered workshop. 44% report they often or sometimes feel lonely, and about 30% live below the poverty line. So that's for that 98% of students or adults with intellectual disability who do not go to college. Now, the data for those that do go to college is much different. For those lucky 2% who can attend post-secondary education, the outcomes are promising. About 59% will find competitive integrated employment in the community 1 year after exit. 87% of those students were enrolled in a credential program while in college. So they're leaving with an actual credential that can help them get employment and other opportunities. And 100% of the programs around the country provide some peer mentor support to students within those colleges. So what if every young adult with intellectual disability in the United States saw college as an option? Wouldn't that change the game? Now, we know that not every student with intellectual disability will go to college, nor should every student without a disability go to college. But we want to really increase those numbers. What if we can get that 2% up to 5% or 7% or 10%? So that's why we created the Think Higher, Think College campaign. And one of the centerpiece elements of this campaign, and everything we show you today is going to be free for you to use and share and put into your resources. And one of the premier things we have is a video I produced that really illustrates what's happening around the country for inclusive post-secondary education. So we're going to show that video to you now. It's 4 minutes long, and then I'll be back with a few last comments before we open it up to the panel.
Hi everyone, I'm a student here at Georgia Tech. We are asking students with intellectual disabilities around the country what's fun about going to college.
It's a chance to not be around your parents.
The best thing about being in college is the food. Being in a dorm, getting to meet new people.
You have a bed, you have a sink, you have a desk, you have a TV, and you have a refrigerator. You can also hang up posters anywhere.
Great mocha latte, the best mocha latte I ever have.
There are more than 420,000 school-age students with intellectual disability, but only 2% of them are likely to attend college after high school.
I wanted to come to KU because of the classes, and I wanted to take choir. And also I took American Sign Language.
The classes I'm taking right now are Business Law 1, Intermediate Algebra, and English Composition 2.
It's cool to meet new people. It's fun to chat with the guys and the managers and the coaches.
I want to be more independent and to join the sorority as my mom did.
I like to hang out with friends, watch sports, and I've joined the Southernmost Coral Restoration Club.
In high school, I have to be with a teacher all the time, so it was not like any dependent there. I was excited to have like a college life.
There are more than 300 inclusive post-secondary education programs around the country.
Having students with disabilities in classes has compelled our faculty to reflect on their practice. So it actually makes us better teachers, makes us better professors, makes us better scholars and researchers.
It's really got people to realize that we have to focus on universal access and doing things in universal design, everything that we do.
The great thing about including students with intellectual disabilities at KU is actually it makes the entire university a better university. It teaches students to appreciate difference, and it creates a more caring environment because students support each other.
This has united, I think, our campus, faculty, staff, and students. They have the opportunity to network and get mentors and other social skills and career development that their peers have had for many years. Now they have.
I want to go into real estate in the future.
My goal is to be a teacher at a preschool.
I would know that run a bed and breakfast.
Political science is one of 3 career goals I have in mind.
My credo is maybe work in the Kansas State Capitol.
I would like to have my own food truck because I want to have pizza, have some burgers, maybe have some tacos, nachos.
College has changed me because it's helped me grow up, like getting a job or living on your own.
It's great, and you have a lot of support when you get here.
If I can do it, you can do it, you know?
It's a time to be serious. It's a time to learn. I have the skills. I have the skills to live on my own one day.
Think higher, think college for students with intellectual disability. Think, access, employment, equity, options, diversity, independence, confidence, friendship. College is possible for students with intellectual disability. Take the first step at thinkhighered.net, a project of Think College.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. And just so you know, you can watch and download that video right here on the thinkhighered.net website. So Becky, my colleague, will throw that link in the chat. And thank you, everyone who's putting your location and identity and affiliations in the chat. We love hearing that. So please keep that going. If you're on the call today, please throw your information in the chat where you're zooming in from. But this is a really important website for you to be aware of because it's where we put all of our resources and lots of critical links to this project. So as I said, you can download the video, you can watch the video. We also have an audio described version that has both captions and audio description for those that might be visually impaired. I'm going to just show you a few things before we get to our panel. If you go to the contact page, you can email people who can answer lots of questions that may not get addressed during this panel. And you can also sign up for updates about the latest on inclusive post-secondary education around the country through our newsletter. So that's definitely two links you want to keep in mind that I think Becky can also throw in the chat. Now, if you go to our resources page, or resources section, I want to point out we have a bunch of Spanish resources as well, but I'm going to point you to the Share Our Campaign section, because that's where we've put together all the resources that I think you're going to find very helpful coming out of today's webinar. If you like social media, we've got a social media kit that'll help you, spread the word about general messages around inclusive post-secondary ed. But the things I really want to point you to are these resource guides. This main resource guide, it's just about a 9-page resource guide, and it is a great overview of inclusive post-secondary education around the country. And it has everything from what is inclusive post-secondary ed to why go to college, who can go to college, how do colleges and universities include students with intellectual disability, et cetera. So I really encourage you to download this guide and use it and share it. And it's all free and yours to share as widely as you'd like. We also have very brief guides, 2 pages, that are geared towards students, teachers, families, and higher education leaders. So check those out for sure. You can also download the videos here as well, including a 1-minute video and the Spanish caption 4-minute or 1-minute video. So there's a lot of great resources here. I don't want to spend too much time on this because we have a great panel and they're ready to go, I think. So I want to make sure the panel is with me and ready to rock and roll. It looks like we've got everybody. Welcome, panel. So I'm going to just kind of go one by one and ask each panelist to introduce themselves, their name, their role and affiliation, and anything they want to say about their background work with students with disabilities before we jump into some questions. So I'll start left to right as I see it with Carla. Carla, if you want to unmute and introduce yourself.
Yes, good afternoon and greetings from Texas. I am the Regional Transition Specialist and a member of the Student-Centered Transitions Network here at Education Service Center Region 11. Education Service Center Region 11 provides professional development, technical assistance to 76 public schools, 17 public charter schools, 90 charter campuses, and 150 private schools. We serve almost 600,000 students and nearly 78,000 education personnel. I'm delighted to be here this afternoon, and I have been a champion of students with disabilities for nearly 28 years.
Thank you, Carla. You reach a lot of people and do a lot of work, good work. So thank you so much for being with us today. Appreciate it. Derek, I'm going to hit you next and ask you to introduce yourself and say hello.
Greetings. Good afternoon. My name is Derek Wesley. I have a couple of affiliations. First, I am the Education Program Director at a goal attainment company called Directed Analytics. I also serve in the capacity of a technical assistant consultant at Think College, and I'm also the Vice Chair of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for SEPSI. I have been working with students with disabilities for 22 years. My pronouns are he, him. I am a 44-year-old African-American male, and I live in the Woodlands area north of Houston. Happy to be here.
Welcome, Derek. We're happy to have you here with us. Thank you for joining. Brenda, I'm going to hop to you next and have you introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hello, everybody. My name is Brenda Barrio, and I am the Assistant Vice President for Research and Innovation at the University of North Texas. I am also the proud faculty lead of the UNT Elevar Inclusive Postsecondary Education Program here at UNT. I have over 20 years of experience working with students, families, and educators that support students with disabilities or students themselves. And then I am also a 40-year-old Hispanic Latinx woman with brown hair. And the background on my screen right now is the University of North Texas when it is nice in the spring. So very nice green background.
Thanks, Brenda. So good to see you again. And as you can see, we have a great Texas representation today. That was just somewhat of a coincidence. We looked for the best panelists we could find, and 3 of them happen to be from Texas. But we do have another Northeasterner like myself here with Mary. So Mary, why don't you go ahead and say hello?
Thanks, Dan. Hi, everybody. My name's Mary Judge Diger, and I am in the very cold University of Rochester in Rochester, New York. I am a white female with graying hair, which I'm learning to embrace as time goes on. And behind me are some of my favorite books and photos of family and nieces and nephews, and of course, my dog. I am the Associate Director at the Center for Disability and Education at the University of Rochester. I have about 30 years experience working in disability in different realms, focused specifically the last 10 years on inclusive higher education. A lot of my work is done in partnership with Think College to develop the newly formed in its newborn version of the accreditation, and so the Inclusive Higher Education Accreditation Council, which I'll talk about throughout the day here and our time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mary. And Catherine's been putting the bios in the chat if anyone wants to see that again. We have a lot to talk about here and a lot of great wisdom. And again, put your questions in the chat and we'll get to as much as we can. But I want to start, I'll come back to Carla for this, especially appropriate since you work at the high school level a lot. When and how should educators start introducing the idea of college and planning for college for students with ID? What do you see as the best approach that you found?
Well, I truly believe that the preparation truly begins very early on. As a member of the Student-Centered Transitions Network, we have developed lots of tools and resources, one in particular called Next Steps to Independence, Skills and Strategies. And this is simply a checklist which introduces skills and strategies for independence as early as birth to the families and even educators. It's a nice checklist, and I believe someone is going to drop that link in the chat, but I truly believe that preparation begins very early on.
Great. Thank you, Carla. Agree. Let me go in the same order I started. I'll hop to Derek next and ask that same question. How and when do you start introducing this notion to students, and what do you think might get them engaged in the idea of college?
To sort of echo, I believe that it needs to start as soon as possible. As soon as the students begin moving into the academic portion of their schooling. I know that there's those milestones with literacy and math that people like to focus on, but I believe that the transition planning, thinking about next steps, needs to start as early as possible. And for students with intellectual disabilities, it's super important to bring in their families and their support systems and keep that communication going and incrementally update progress and keep looking forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Derek. Now, Brenda, I know you're on a college campus and you have students coming to visit you. Do you want to talk at all about how young you start engaging with students or what you think might be ideal in your book for early engagement?
Absolutely. And to echo my colleagues, I think it has to be as early as possible. Now, what does that mean? I think we need to, as educators, family members, including students as well, need to really think about having high expectations that college is possible for them. And there are many different possibilities. Hopefully by the time that they reach that time, they have those opportunities and more than just the ones that we currently have. But here on the college campus, we start seeing students as early as elementary school. We have many field trips that come around at UNT, many of them, and I think we're seeing it more now that we have UNT Elevar as part of our college campus. But we're starting to see students with intellectual disability come and learn more about college campuses since early on. The majority of our students are coming in from middle school and high school, but I think they're starting a ripple effect that elementary students are also part of the traditional field trip to college.
That's amazing. I love hearing that it's so early. My dad was a college professor at City University of New York, and I used to go visit him at work. I grew up across the river from Rutgers, so I used to go to Rutgers and deliver pizzas. So that kind of early exposure had an impact, And so, Mary, at Rochester, do you find as well that you're engaging students younger and younger, hopefully, or what's the scene look like there?
I think we can do better, which is similar to what the other panelists are saying. I remember personally being in 4th grade and talking about, what college might be like and having career day. I don't think it should be any different for students with intellectual disabilities. I think that not everyone knows, meaning families, students, transition specialists, K through 12, even really know or understand consistently, in our area at least, that these programs are even available. So I think that that's really important because similar, to what Brenda was saying, having expectations and bars be set high is really, really important, but everyone needs to know that what's available when you do set that bar high.
Mary, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question, and Brenda may want to weigh in on this as well. That sort of just came into the chat from Linda. What about introducing college a little bit later in life? What are the possibilities for maybe someone who doesn't, with an intellectual disability, who's in their mid-20s or late 20s? Is college still a possibility at that point in their life?
Yes. And Brenda, you might be able to speak more in detail to some of your programs, but yeah, later in life, it doesn't have to be right after high school or while someone's still in high school.
Absolutely. I agree. I think there's so many students that are realizing now, whether they're 25, 26, 27, that this is a possibility and they want to pursue a career in not only in higher education, but gain all the skills and the knowledge to have a different career, something that they want to focus on. So absolutely, we see it from both ends, and even more so after the high school years, that we're very excited that they are realizing this is a possibility.
Derek, I see you've got something, and thank you for doing the raise hand function. That's a good way to trigger me to know that you want to ask a question or chime in. So Derek, go ahead.
Oh, no problem. I had a really inspirational encounter with a gentleman who was celebrating his 10th year in competitive employment, and he was 54 years old. Several years ago, when he graduated, he was told that there was no need to work on employability skills because it just wasn't an option. I feel like that type of thinking is limiting. And so whether or not it's college or living independently or work, we just have to socially engineer folks and get them to start thinking about the possibilities and not about limits.
Excellent additional points. Carla, let me bounce back to you to get to this very fundamental question of why is college even a desirable path for students with intellectual disability? I made some points with data early on, but what would be your case for college for students with ID to at least explore that?
Well, I think that students participating in college beyond high school and even further allows them an opportunity to have meaningful participation in the communities that they live in. I think that that's very important, be it going on to employment, self-employment, the social component or aspect of it, and certainly the independent living components. So that would be my take on it.
Excellent. Mary, let me jump to you. What are there certain outcomes that you think are more likely to happen, or what's the case you would make for college as an access point?
As far as outcomes go, I think that college provides a lot socially with employment, builds a lot of confidence, which some of the panelists have already kind of reflected to. So I think that what it does for students that don't have a disability, it often does for students that do have a disability.
That's right.
Brenda, do you want to add on to that?
Just a brief reminder to really ask ourselves, what was it about college, if we attended college, right, that we learned from, or what were some of the outcomes for us, sometimes lifelong skills or outcomes in general. It's the same thing for our students. So why not have them experience something that's very similar to what we experience?
Yeah, so I had a great conversation at one point with a friend of mine up at Syracuse who said, a lot of students without disabilities have this, quote, soft landing into adulthood through college, right? Where somebody's usually cooking your meals in the cafeteria, and you might, have laundry access or stable housing. Why is it that students with disabilities don't have that option for that same soft landing, so to speak? Derek, go ahead. You wanted to add in. Oh, you're muted, Derek. Is your hand still up? Let's see. Oh, you were unmuted, now you're muted again. Let's try one more time. There we go. Go for it.
Okay, got it. I wanted to point out that in the Essentials of Transition Planning, they noted that participants in inclusive higher ed programs or higher ed programs for people with intellectual disabilities are significantly are employed at significantly higher rates. I believe the figures were between 73 and 91% for individuals that have participated in these programs versus the numbers that you gave earlier, around anywhere from 10 to 15%. So there is something to the higher ed experience that significantly contributes to success in employment.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think college has done some research along those lines to really dig into that stat. Mary, I want to ask you a follow-up to this theme around accreditation, because you worked a lot in accreditation. And some people would say, to be clear, these inclusive post-secondary education programs are not typically degree-seeking programs. That is important people to know. They don't leave with a bachelor's degree. But there's increasingly some standardization or unification around accreditation. Do you want to speak to that briefly so people know what someone might leave with from college in terms of accreditation?
Oh goodness, Dan, I'm going to try and keep it brief, but I could talk about it for a long time.
Okay.
But it's really accrediting programs for inclusive higher education is really new. Only one program in the entire country has been accredited so far. We're in our pilot phase. So Western Carolina University's UP program has been accredited, and this spring we travel to Colorado Springs and VCU in Richmond there to do their pilot sites. So accreditation is really going to lend itself to allow programs to work on quality improvement, learn more from peers during peer reviews about how to tackle sustainability. So there's a lot that accreditation can offer, but when it comes to family and students, it'll give families the opportunity to say, oh yeah, that program's accredited and they've been held to a standard. There's 10 program standard areas. They've been held to a standard and they've met that. And so families can have that.
And if you want to know more about that, Mary can talk your ear off about lots of information you've got about accreditation for sure, in a good way. Carla, let me ask you a different question. You work a lot with high school students or in that realm. What are your strategies for helping students with disabilities prepare for college, get ready for that point in their life?
Well, from an ESC perspective, we have and will continue to offer numerous nuggets or bite-sized sessions specifically for students and their families, students with disabilities and their families, and educators related to elements such as the elements of self-determination, self-regulation, goal setting, decision-making, and so much more. And this collaborative partnership with students, families, and educators, I find that it builds camaraderie. And in our state, our districts are having to assess the collaborative partnerships that they have with families, family engagement. So I have found that this has been very successful. Some of the sessions that we've offered to our parents and our caregivers, they foster self-determination in the home and provide the families with opportunities to encourage their students to gain independence and work on various types of skills. And Another important message that I find is very important for all of our families that we provide training to is to encourage them to always presume competence. During our youth sessions, we provide students with tools, strategies, and resources to practice self-determination in school and their community. So this is just an example of some of the things that we have done at the ESC related to helping our students prepare for college and even careers.
Thank you, Carl. That's a lot of great information and perspectives. I want to come to either Brenda or Derek with the same question, but I want to interject quickly with an anecdote. In terms of self-determination, Carla, you mentioned that probably the best piece of parenting advice I ever got was from Bob Williams. Some of you may know Bob as an incredible leader in Washington, D.C., who has led big agencies like the ACL and other agencies. And he's also a wheelchair user and a communication device user. And when I got to interview him when my son Samuel was about 3, maybe, and I said, what's your advice for me, Bob? Help me out here. And he said, give Samuel choices at every juncture. Just always give him choices. What do you want to wear today? You know, when do you want to do your homework? What kind of snack do you want? And those are the kind of choices we all should be able to make. And they are so formative as you become an adult in terms of having those self-determination skills, right? That will be so useful in your adult life as well. So Brenda or Derek, do you have other thoughts about how to prepare students, strategies for preparing them for college? Go ahead, Brenda. I see you nodding. You want to chime in?
Oh, I was going to let Derek go on this one.
Go next.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's many different skills that students can really prepare for. But I think one of the most important ones is beyond self-determination is trying to seek as much independence as possible, and not just from the student's perspective, but also the family's perspective. And independence may look very different from one culture to another. So I want to be very mindful about that. But that doesn't mean that, you know, as a parent of a student, a third grader without a disability, for now, I still want to do everything for him, right? To make sure that he stays in a bubble. And so you add different layers. We want to make sure that our students are independent and they can make their own choices. That may mean that they get to not only, you know, select their clothing, but also maybe try and order their own food at the restaurant, or, you know, pay for their own snack at Target. Who knows, right? So there's many different skills to prepare. Now, academically, we encourage all educators to also, just the way that I discussed having high expectations, academically do the same thing, right? Using universal design for learning, using technology, assistive technology, to support reading or writing or anything else like that. There's many different ways, and I think the accessibility of that in our current landscape and technology can really bring a lot of opportunities for our students that perhaps they didn't have before.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Derek, go ahead.
Sure, and in sort of piggybacking off what Brenda said, I think it's important as we look at those outcomes, we always keep sustainability in the forefront. And then as these individuals develop skills in those areas, in their, you know, sustainable goals in either independent living or employment, or educational goals, that we're super mindful about staying consistent with our data collection methods and using data-driven decision-making to really align strategies and interventions to those skill areas where there might be challenges, and staying on top of it, because I think that consistency is what keeps the development moving forward in a positive trajectory.
Mm-hmm. Great. All great perspectives. I'm going to shift gears a little bit now for Mary. You know, one of the realities of college in general is affordability is a challenge for a lot of families. And I don't have the stats handy, but I would guess that overall nationally, the college population is not necessarily representative demographically, racially, ethnically of the country as a whole, you know. So I think the whole issue of diversity and equity is a challenge for college in general, and certainly for inclusive post-secondary education. So how can we create more equity and diversity within these programs specifically?
I think that, you know, back to kind of what I was saying earlier, I think getting the word out throughout districts, K through 12 school districts, but school districts in urban settings, rural settings, everywhere. I think a lot of folks don't really know or understand. I don't have the stats in front of me either, but I do know that people of color are not represented at high numbers in inclusive higher education programs. And I think that I know that there are efforts being made at Think College now to start talking to colleges and talking to different programs and school districts about that. But it is definitely something that is really important and that we need to make an effort to do. And I think that a lot of students are female. So I think male students as well are not as highly represented as female students. So again, I just think it's getting the word out. I think it's providing education, but most importantly, being intentional on how we're doing that.
Thank you, Mary. I think Brenda, you wanted to weigh in on this question as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the next step for any of us that lead these types of programs. But I think it has to be a collective effort. So not only do school districts, administrators, higher education, these programs really have to work at it and spread the word. I think we have to work collaboratively with and in a partnership with families and students, especially from marginalized communities. We need to listen in to see what their goals are. Sometimes what we think the goals for our students should be are not the same as what families may have to as a reference, right? Especially, first generation or other marginalized communities. And so I think we really have to think about it from a very culturally responsive way, not only sharing this with different communities, but doing so in a way that is meaningful and respectful and opens the communication between all these spaces in order for us to really understand the impact of what higher education could be for their students as well. And that can look in many different ways. We do a lot of efforts with Parent Resource Network, for example, that goes across the state of Texas and beyond in Spanish-speaking workshops, all the way to transition fairs, you name it, right? So we're in the community talking to them, but also provide a lot of what we just talked about, the toolkits and the different skill development that we do with everybody else.
Yeah, and I want to just reiterate, as you just alluded to, the tools we created, the video, the toolkits, it's exactly for that purpose, to show it 4 minutes in an IEP meeting, show that video, hand out the guide for families or students. That's what it's designed for. Carla or Derek, is there anything you wanted to add to this specific question around creating equity and diversity before I move on?
No.
Covered it. All right. So Derek, let me ask you, a lot of this all starts with transition planning, this whole, pathway. So are there ways that we can improve on transition planning that you practice or believe in?
Oh, 100%. So with my company, Directed Analytics, I have partnered with a couple of gentlemen who are from the engineering world. And so by applying like a systems thinking approach or an engineering design process to transition, we feel as though we've been able to create more consistent outcomes, standardized methods, get very precise with the alignment of key subject matter experts, whether it's a communication barrier, it's a behavioral challenge, whether or not it's something related to other health impairment and something medical. We're able to keep those things aligned and consistent, because I think with transition, in anything, any meaningful dialogue, there has to be a shared definition of terms between all parties involved. So that mutual understanding allows for more efficient collaboration. And I don't want to filibuster here, but I'm gonna get to it. But I did want to point out that, looking at the constraints or the issues, brainstorming, planning, using diagrams, gathering materials, resources, creating the plan, testing it out, and then repeating steps 1 through 5 and working on getting better. I also wanted to say that when you think about those, what engineering they call feedback loops, when you're talking about employability or independent living, you have to make sure that you keep those strategies up front and develop, answers or mitigations when something doesn't go as planned. And today, a lot of people in education, specifically in special education, they have a tremendous workload. And so it's not that people are putting transition planning on the back burner. It's just they have to prioritize, academic things or who knows how many individual students they have on a caseload. So coming up with an efficient way for folks to keep transition planning in the forefront and consistent is what's needed, especially as we move into the next decade or so.
Great. Thank you, Derek. A lot of food for thought there. I appreciate that. And I just again want to remind people to put questions in the chat that you want to see answered today. We've got dozens of people here, and so we want to answer your questions that as they come up. But I do want to, Brenda, come to you and others as well, Carla and Mary, but Brenda first. Along the same lines, how can the IEP process and transition planning really be designed to support college as a viable option during that process that should start, when the kids are quite young, like middle school?
That's correct, right? So if we're talking about having these conversations early on, elementary school, even earlier, we should be including it in their IEPs as goals, right? And that can look at many different ways, but we know from research that we should start at least transition planning at the age of 14. We're starting to look at perhaps it should be earlier, right? So before, around middle school age, if not younger, but we should start having those high expectations and having those conversations embedded within the IEP process itself from early on. So I'm going to include, I wrote an article for practitioners specifically, so not a research article, but with strategies on this concept of IEPs and culturally responsive transition IEP specifically that I'll drop on the chat. But really think about it from a perspective of if college could be an option, what is it that the student really needs to get at? And again, making sure that the family and most importantly, the student is a central part of who we're thinking about, and for them to voice what they want, what they don't want, and what they need. I think that student-centered IEP is important.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to reading that article. I've not read it yet. And Urban Collaborative is going to share all the links in a follow-up email, just so you know, that are being posted today, because there's just a ton of information being dropped into the chat. Carla, what about you in terms of transition planning? Are there certain ways that you found that the transition planning process can integrate college as a possibility successfully?
Well, I was gonna say that I really appreciated the little brief description that Derek provided about the metrics. I love that idea, and just keeping the transition planning up front and revisited as often as possible, helping those students to realize or remember what their goals were or are, and communicating that with families as well. And I am such a proponent of student-led IEPs, and I think more and more of our districts are having students participate in that process, and I think that is very powerful as well.
Yeah, and I'll put it in the chat. I agree with you 100%, Carl, on the student-led IEPs. My son Samuel started co-leading his IEPs in middle school, and it totally changed the game. It made him so much more engaged in the IEP process, a sense of ownership. And I did a short film called Garrett Shows I'm in Charge, and it has a great scene of a student-led IEP meeting. So I'll put that in the chat in just a minute. But Mary, I want to jump to you about something slightly different. You're on the college campus. And so you probably see the ups and downs of the experiences of college students, in Rochester. So what are some barriers that students with intellectual disability have in that transition? I mean, we want to be honest here and not sugarcoat the realities. Every college student has a transitional phase. What are some challenges? What are some solutions that you found for that transition?
So first, just really quick, back to the last question. I just
Sure,
want to add one thing that I've seen firsthand that's been really helpful with IEPs is, of course, having them student-led, but scheduling times for students to visit campuses. And campuses that have programs. I think that's something that's really important that we've seen be effective for a few students here. So when it comes to challenges and barriers for specifically preparing students with intellectual disability for college, there's resistance to, I'm going from a supportive K through 12 school to here at Rochester to this big campus where I'm just dropping my student off in a bus loop and hoping for the best. But even if you're not dropping them off, transportation is a major issue for many of the programs across the nation and here in Rochester. So even just simply as, how is my student even going to get to that program? What about public safety? Public safety ever know how to experience or work with a student with intellectual disability? Do they know the programs even on campus? Those are all things that are really important, I think, because safety is always a big concern for students and for families. It's overwhelming, especially depending on the size of the school.
Thanks, Mary. I'm going to, Brenda, ask you the same question. I do want to point out that people are asking a little bit about funding for inclusive post-secondary ed, and Becky put a link in the chat about funding options that Think College has designed. So make sure you grab that link now or in the follow-up email. But Brenda, other challenges that you see students having coming in and how you try to problem solve those?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're starting to see a trend here that many of our students are still being seen as asexual, for example. And so health and sexual education is extremely important. And we should really try to remove our, this conceptual framework that we have that individuals with intellectual disability are never going to want a partner, are never going to have a partner, right? Which is untrue, right? So I think it's a very important conversation to start having from every aspect, whether it's the schools, whether it is families, the students themselves, everybody that supports them. It's extremely important. Of course, funding is another one. So getting to work with your local VR representatives, not only for the families, but also from the schools. I'm starting to see a lot of schools finally take on, having a true connection with vocational rehabilitation, and they come and do a lot of the employment training. They do a lot of supports for professional development for educators and so on, that I think is very helpful. And again, just giving them chances and opportunities to be as independent as possible.
Thanks, Brenda. Somebody put a question in the chat or a point that I think will be a great transition point to talk about mentorship and peer mentorship. Christine wrote, the change of mindset needs to happen to the entire population. One way is having peer mentor programs in middle school and high school. So Mary, let me jump to you. Do you have some peer mentorship, structures in place that you can talk about? Because it's a very common thing in these programs.
Yes, in the college setting, peer mentors can be paid or not paid positions, often with volunteers. And peer mentors are somebody that works individually with a student, that gets to know the students really well, understands the program, knows the program staff really well. And then depending on what the student's needs are, the peer mentor will then help and guide that student.
And Derek, I think you had some points about CTP and mentorship that you wanted to make.
Yes. So, and this is a really good recommendation for transition specialists and folks at the K-12 level, sort of reaching out to their inclusive post-secondary higher ed programs in their area and forming that relationship early, especially when you're looking at the visitation, sort of bolstering family expectations, because I think the research points as family expectations is one of the 4 keys to success in post-secondary ed for folks with intellectual disabilities, in addition to employment. And so those individuals, those students, those young men and women, sort of knowing that they'll have that emotional support and even opportunities for them to sort of come and visit them in K-12, it'll sort of ease that transition and lead to successful transitions.
Thank you, Derek. Brenda, there's a question that came in that relates to this question to some extent as well. The question from Sheena was, if dorms and independent living are not possible, I'm thinking community college or vocational, do you still feel the student still acquires the social and emotional benefits of college? So we should point out that many, but not all programs have residential living for students with inclusive and post-secondary ed programs like UNT. So I guess part of it is, do you think there's still a lot of social benefits, even without that living situation on campus?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we call our universities or colleges, tiny cities, right? Because there's so many different aspect of that our students learned to navigate, from going to their accountant, office and paying for tuition, all the way to advising or even employment, right? But even beyond that, many of these programs are out in the community, and so I think there's that very important connection between our students and expanding their notion for social skills, for relationship building, for communication skills, and so on and so forth. So I think even though there might not be that dorm, beyond some of these programs, it is extremely important. Even here at UNT Elevar, we believe that the first 2 years, yes, they might stay here in the dorms, but we require the students to move out, in the second, their third and fourth year into, whether it's an apartment off campus or somewhere else in the community, so they can begin transitioning into what real life, like for the rest of us, had after college.
Great. Before I move on, anybody else want to talk about the social aspect before we jump to another point? Because I did want to ask Carla. I'm not seeing anyone jump in, so I'm going to jump forward. Carla, I wanted to ask you about the college school district relationships. I think that's pretty unique. People may not fully understand that you and Brenda collaborate on this front to some extent. So do you want to talk about how you developed that relationship with UNT or any other colleges you might have a relationship with?
Well, sure. It's an honor to honestly be a part of UNT Elevar as far as being a board member is concerned. For the last couple of years, I've had an opportunity to look at student applications and videos as they are trying to prepare themselves or get admitted into the Elevar program. I also work very closely with Texas A&M University and the programs that they have, and also with a two-year college. So I thought the conversation that we were having just a few moments ago about not having dorms, there is a two-year program here that I also have worked closely with that provides those students with just the opportunity to be a part of that that campus culture. So as far as Brenda and I are concerned, anything that UNT Elevar needs or wants, I will do my best and just participate. I truly believe I am a champion for the great work that they are doing. And so it really is an honor to get to work with she and her team.
If you hear noises, my dog making a ruckus behind me. Brenda, I want to actually come to you. Actually, Mary, I want to come to you for a minute and ask you about researching the best college options. There's not all programs are the same. For some people, it might make the most sense regionally to just go to the closest college for a lot of reasons. But there may be people that really want to look at a wider region and figure out what's the best fit for them as a student, for their child. How do they go about doing that?
Yeah, so it's really, as you said, I just want to really emphasize that every program is different. And so it's important to keep that in mind. And I would go to the Think College website. It has an incredibly comprehensive map that you can choose states. You can filter it in many different ways versus what, based on what you're looking into, what you want, and really find great programs. And if that program has residential, it'll tell you, and you can search for those residential programs. So I would really encourage you to do that. And I would just remember, like I said, that every program is very different and offers different things.
And I would say from my own work as a filmmaker and journalist, there are some programs that really emphasize having students with intellectual disability in typical classes for all of the majority of the time. And there are some programs that frankly don't, they're much more segregated environments. So you have to think about what you want and what's right for your kid and for yourself, and think about that. Derek, I wanted to just have you address the issue of person-centered planning, because that's something I know you feel passionately about, and we've done a lot in our family, and I think it's an important part of the transition process that can happen either at home or at school or in other environments. What would you like to say about that?
Sure. Like, person-centered planning is perhaps the integral way to learn about the choices and interests of a person, and learn about their idea of what they want out of life. And then, also, identify those supports, both paid and unpaid, that they need to achieve that life. And we always have to remember that it's not something you do to a person. It's not something you do for a person, but it's something that the person themselves direct with support from someone, as they desire. And on top of that, making sure that you remain in a strengths-based focus, making sure that it's culturally informed and that it's whole person focused, and that you cultivate those connections inside the system and out. We need to emphasize rights, choice, and control. I know Brenda mentioned earlier about aspects of planning that people leave out, and making certain assumptions about their desire to have a family. Then also, emphasizing partnership, teamwork, communication. And then finally, the piece that I've been focusing on in recent years is that documentation piece. I know with person-centered planning, we are striving to create a model where there can be data sharing from the beginning of transition age, let's say the traditional transition age of 14 on through. So a particular school district might have a partnership with the local inclusive higher ed program. And then also, let's say with Voc Rehab and other service providers, and with everyone able to share information and document an individual's progress towards a goal, I think we can really, really make some big system changes to how this looks.
I'm so glad you covered that. I'm a huge fan. I'm sure we all are. Person-centered planning is part of this whole picture. Ruchika, I'm going to invite you to come back on camera to talk about a few things related to Urban Collaborative. We do have time to go just a little beyond the hour, but we wanted to cover a few things before the hour, and then we'll linger a little bit to get a few more points in, a few more questions addressed. So Ruchika, I'm going to share this slide at this point, and you can use that to make your points.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you all for this amazing conversation, and hope that you'll stay on if you need more of your questions answered and just to engage in a conversation with the panel. But we hope that if you have to leave, that you're leaving today with some next steps in moving this work forward. Always feel free to reach out to us at the Urban Collaborative. As we shared in the beginning, we will be sharing this recording with you all who all registered today, who were able to join, and then all others who weren't able to. You will also be able to view this recording along with other podcasts, Zoom meetings, webinars, and other helpful resources from the Urban Collaborative on our website. We just posted the link, urbancollaborative.org. Quick shout out about our other upcoming online events for February. A podcast with Dave Kivra will be released on February 6th, in which Dave provides a parent's perspective on his family, and his 11-year-old son, Abdisa, and their journey in accessing supports around Abdisa's learning disability. Our next Zoom meeting is with Facing History on Ourselves, where they will explore their Teaching for Equity Justice program with the participants on February 27th. And we will also in February share a second part of a training developed by Wilson Language Learning, where they put theory into practice and unlock the power of structured literacy for all learners. We also want to remind our members who are here today that registration for our spring meeting, so that's the next slide, Dan, is open. We look forward to seeing you all in Portland, where our conversations will be around creating a roadmap to equitable and inclusive schools. We hope some of you will join us there. If you're not currently a member and want to join the over 100 school district members from the 29 states across the country who are our Urban Collaborative members, please email us at urbancollaborative@asu.edu. We also want to let our members know that we are ready to launch our member-only Google Chat, so keep an eye out for this information, and we hope that some of the questions that you might have after today's panel, you can let us know, and we can add that so that others can hear about it. And with that, we also from the Urban Collaborative want to thank our panelists, Dan Habib, and all of you for joining us. If you would like to stay on again, we welcome you to stay on with the panelists and us. But if you need to leave, have an excellent rest of the day, and thank you.
And before we do leave, before we have a few more minutes to answer a few more points, we're going to talk just briefly after this about reasonable accommodation plans and a couple of other key points that we haven't addressed yet. But I just want to remind everyone, go to thinkhighered.net for all the resources we've talked about, the video, all the printable resources. They're right there for the taking. You can distribute them at IEP meetings. You can send them out to your teaching staff. Anything you want to do with them, they're free and federally funded to spread away. And we do have the Take Action page on the website, and you can use this QR code if it's not too small to jump to that with your phones if you want to grab it. But we will send this all out as a follow-up email as well. There's posters about inclusive post-secondary education you can download, lots of great information to share. And we'd love for you to just do two things as we start to wind down in the next few minutes. There was a link put in the chat with a very short evaluation, like 3 questions. It'll take you 2 seconds. If you could just click through the link that Becky put in the chat, we'd really appreciate it. We need to collect data on the impact and reach of the work we're doing. So please just take a second to fill that out. And if you feel like throwing in the chat what you plan to do with the information today, how you plan to use those resources, these resources, we would really love to hear it. And you can always give us feedback anytime by emailing us, by filling out this survey. So last couple points as we go through here. Again, I have a lot of personal experience with this through my son Samuel. His IEP was very formative in creating a reasonable accommodation plan in college, which I think a lot of students benefit from at the college level. Does anybody want to jump in who has familiarity with the reasonable accommodation plan and how that's played out at the college level? Just unmute and talk.
Sure. I mean, I think so. There's a couple of things to consider. One, ADA and how higher education really serves students under that, right? So those are very mainstream. Those are things that traditionally institutions of higher education already have in place, right? But many of our programs provide additional accommodations or even modifications depending, again, on the program. So I think that's a great question to ask. As you're doing more research, as Mary was talking about, right? Ask in the information sessions that each college program provides, ask what types of accommodations or modifications they may be able to provide. There are some things, for example, that we are, not allowed to do here in the UNT campus, like, provide medication, because that's a totally different, can of worms that we can, that's HIPAA and all kinds of other things, right? And so you really have to think about what are the current accommodations that my student and modifications that my student receives in K-12 that may or may not be able to be provided at the college level. But you do have to ask because, again, there might be some differences. They're always going to be less than what the K-12 provides. So also be aware of those things. But most importantly, I think it's always asking the student, are these some of the accommodations or even modifications that the students may receive in K-12 are going to look very differently, and they might not even need them, in higher education. Many of our students are using, for example, assistive technology they always get concerned about, well, they're not reading at college level, right? And we're like, well, that's what assistive technology is for. We use books, digital books, and our students learn how to use assistive technology to listen to those books and then go from there, right? So there's many differences between the two, but I think asking is the most important way to go about it.
And that reminds me, Brenda, a lot of people don't know you do not need a high school diploma to go to one of these inclusive post-secondary ed programs. That is not a requirement. And as you said, there's lots of accommodations through assistive technology, through reasonable accommodation plans, so that even students with very significant intellectual disabilities, however that might be measured, are not ruled out from these programs. A lot of them are able to go to college. So I wonder if anyone wants to add to any of these discussions, but particularly the issue of dual enrollment. Have you seen, Mary or Carla or Derek, students who are still part of their school district, maybe in that 18 to 21 age, who are also starting to take or audit or have some time on college campuses? I'm really not too familiar with that, and I wonder if anyone else is. Mary, you're nodding. Do you have some knowledge there?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, we have a program here where students will come from a local district and they'll take a bus that the school district provides, and then students will come and spend time on campus and then return back to where they were. And then we have some students that will come, which is different than what you're talking about, but that are here engaged all day and evening. So the dual enrollment programs are, again, in the filter, when you look at the map, you can specifically select dual enrollment programs and search to see which ones are near you or in a part of the country that you'd like the student would like to go to.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else want to touch on that point specifically? If not, I was going to ask also about, somebody put in the chat a question about students recruiting other students, like having college students go to high schools and recruit or present or create awareness. Is that happening in any of your arenas? I'm curious.
I personally haven't heard of it, but I do think that's an amazing idea.
No.
Many of our students actually go to their communities or their previous schools and start sharing their experiences. Is it official recruitment? No. Sometimes we do send them with some swag, because they want to share it with some of the students. So why not? But I think it's more just like any, most college students, they go and share their experiences with other folks. And then the word, starts spreading. Now, we do have very more formalized ways. So we host every year a conference. Usually it's virtual. This year we're going to have one here that it's physical for the first time, where we have a student panel. And so a lot of those conversations happen, whether in passing or during the student panel in the conference.
Great. Well, I think we can start to wind down here. I'm going to invite anybody to say any last words that just burning on your mind, something we haven't come up with or talked about. I'll just share one thing, which is that I think in too many schools around the country, students with disabilities they're not creating time for them to go to the college fairs that are happening within the school. They're not doing the same college tours. They're not having the same exposure. And frankly, those of you who know me know I'm a big fan of inclusive education for students with disabilities. And if you're learning alongside your peers, if you're hearing from your siblings about college experiences, you need to hear about the excitement around college in order for it to pique your interest. Because as much as we adults can talk about it, there's nothing like hearing it from your peers, right, who are excited about college. So the more we can do to create exposure to college for all students with disabilities at that K through 12 level, the more they're going to see this as a potential path for them. Derek, you unmuted, so go right ahead.
I did. So when I first started out years ago, I had the pleasure of attending a regional transition fair. And those transition fairs are excellent ways to sort of get the word out, to increase, awareness, and to have to enable families to speak directly to, program directors and staff. And I think the challenge comes in for smaller districts, for rural districts, that transportation might be an issue. And so I've been talking to people to sort of create more virtual transition fair options so that people can attend using technology and really understand what the options are.
I appreciate you bringing that up. The virtual transition fair, just like we're doing today, it creates access, it creates opportunity and convenience for people to participate. Anybody else have a final thing? Go ahead, Mary.
Just one thing that something you just said made me think of it. Those of us that have worked in the field for a long time, and we say the word inclusive a lot, but I think it's important for families and students to remember that everybody defines inclusive differently, unfortunately. And so I'm of the mind of you, Dan, where I think that, students should be fully included as every other student, as whether the student has a disability or not. But that's just not always the case. And so I think really understanding how a program or school district is defining inclusion and keeping that in the forefront of your mind is important.
Agreed. That's why discussions like this, and that's why I love films, because I get to bring people into these communities, into these great schools like UNT, where I got to film in that video to show like how it's done with a lot of fidelity, really, this work. Carla or Brenda, any final words from you before we start to wrap?
I was just going to mention, just to the educators that are on today, or even family members, just exploring and visiting campuses is just a great way to envision the possibilities, and also find out if there are any colleges or universities that offer any type of a summer opportunity or camp. That would give you a good opportunity to determine if it's a good fit.
Yeah, great point. Really great point. Brenda?
Yeah, absolutely. I really think that this takes a village, but it also takes changing the mindset of that village. And I think we only pursue that and make it a reality if we follow the students' wants and needs and dreams. And I think we have to center the student to what their career or what their life, whether it's independence or not, really may look like. And I think we should really respect that and follow that. I mean, that's where the person-centered planning comes into play. But as educators, from any level, I was an elementary ed teacher, right? But at any level, and also community members and family members, we should really respect and cherish that. And so I think that is just the start. And now that we have access to many colleges, continue and push forward for other universities to start their own programs as well.
Great. Well, with that, I want to just show that I think the greatest testament to the The excellent nature of this panel is we had almost 200 people register. We had a great number of those attend today, and most of them are still with us right now, even though we're over time. So that's a real tribute to you all for your commitment to making the best outcomes possible for young adults with disabilities. So we so appreciate you being here. So appreciate my colleague Becky Lazo for quickly putting all those links in the chat, and for the Urban Collaborative team for organizing this, hosting it, and being such great collaborators on this work to have better outcomes and stronger outcomes for students with all kinds of disabilities. Ruchika, do you want to say anything as we close?
Not at all. You said it all. Thank you all so much for staying with us. And again, reach out. Let's build a network, right? Keep building this network further and further.
Yeah. Thank you for the panel. Thank you for your expertise, your passion, and your time today. We so appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.